this is a mistake. So, I'm about to embark on a discussion that I have really not wanted to have. And that is in regards to Amber Heard. So, before I get too far into the weeds on this at all, here's something I want to make absolutely clear at the front end. I am not here to litigate or debate what went on between Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. That's not what this video is about. Please do not devolve my comment section into an argument or shouting at people over what they should or shouldn't believe about the situation between the two of them. That is not what I'm here to talk about today. Don't turn it into that. I will touch briefly on some of the things that have gone on, but I want to have the conversation that is usually what I want to have when I talk about these things, like when I talked about Joss Whedon, like when I talked about Gina Carano. I want to talk about how the situation is similar to or different from circumstances that we've already seen where someone involved in a creative work seems to have basically a dark cloud around them. And to then talk about why this is or isn't playing out the way that we've seen it play out in other cases. That's the conversation I will be having today. Okay? At time of recording, and Lord help me if this changes between when I shoot this and when it goes up, but at time of recording, the rumor went around earlier today that Amber Heard had been fired from Aquaman 2. That rumor, at time of recording, has largely been debunked by more reliable sources than were the source of the original rumor that she had been fired. So at present, at time of recording, she does appear to still be working on Aquaman 2. Here's the thing. Even if that changes, ideally after I get this video out, but even if it changes before I get this video live, I still think I have stuff to talk about here that is going to be relevant to a discussion, regardless of what the ultimate outcome of whether she does or does not stay on the project is. So, super briefly, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp are ex-spouses. They were married. They had a very tumultuous marriage. And since their breakup, there has been continued litigation on multiple fronts between the two of them, between Johnny Depp and newspapers in the UK, which was something I actually talked about over on the Council of Geeks. And now there's more litigation that is scheduled to come up between Heard and Depp. There were recordings that came out that really muddied the waters versus what was sort of the, by some people at least, the accepted narrative of what had gone out. Nobody looks good in this. And again, I am not here to say who is right, who is wrong, who is victim, who is abuser. That's not the conversation today. But know that there is certainly a very vocal contingent of people who are very angry at Amber Heard, and there is reason to believe that she had an abusive relationship with Johnny Depp, not solely as a victim and possibly not as a victim at all. Again, this is not the debate. I'm just laying the groundwork for what the temperature of the room is where all this is happening. So, there have been calls for some time to get Amber Heard removed from her role as Mera from the DC universe of films. At this point, she has played the character twice. Once in Justice League and once in Aquaman. I believe she was brought back for some of the reshoots done on Zack Snyder's cut. I didn't bother to double check that though, because it's not super relevant to the conversation I'm going to have. So here's mainly what I want to talk about. how is this different from or similar to the stuff we've seen going on, well, honestly, in the last few weeks, but also the last few years? Let's pull back and look at a bigger picture. Because on the surface, this would appear to be another case of a person involved in a major franchise who there appear to be issues with. A significant part of the audience appears to be turning on them. And the question becomes whether the people behind the film keep them on or cut them loose. And so far, at time of recording, Warner Brothers appears to be keeping Amber Heard on board. Though even that, there may be some dispute about, because another rumor that's come out since the fired, no, not fired thing happened is there is some reporting that Amber Heard believes that Warner Brothers may have leaked that rumor in the first place, basically to gauge reaction. Now, I'm not going to put a ton of weight behind that notion, either that it happened or that she believes that it happened, because again, sourcing on that is not great. And this is part of why I really have not wanted to talk about Amber Heard at all, because the rumor mill is insane on this. And there's a lot of confirmed insanity, but it spirals into nonsense very quickly. But let's compare it to some of the stuff that's gone on lately. Let's start with Joss Whedon. Now, Joss Whedon, while technically not fired, official word is he chose to leave his upcoming HBO show, The Nevers, because of creative differences. It seems fairly clear at this point that even if he left voluntarily, it was with the knowledge that they were probably going to ask him to leave later anyways. So with Whedon, the issue has been his on-set behavior, the way he has treated his actors, his fellow writers, and those who work underneath him on set. So Whedon is probably the most toxic right now. And I don't mean necessarily in terms of behavior. I mean in terms of he's kind of radioactive, the idea of working with him right now. Because not only has the public perception of him turned very harshly, it's because of the way he conducts himself in the work environment. So even if the public decided they were kind of over it, just in the mechanisms of Hollywood, most people are going to go, I don't want to work with that guy. I heard how he treated people. So he's really kind of untouchable right now. Then there is Gina Carano. Now, did a whole video explaining this, but short version, from my perspective, I do not believe that Carano was taken off of The Mandalorian. Fired is... I don't think it's inaccurate. Technically, they chose not to renew her contract to bring her back for future seasons and spin-off work. But that there, I do not believe was a moral judgment because of the sorts of stuff she had been tweeting, which, as a reminder, there was some mockery of the use of putting pronouns in bios on Twitter. That caused a kerfuffle. There was some anti-mask stuff. There was some other stuff later that was a very messy invoking of things that had gone on with the Jews in the lead up to the Holocaust that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But I still do not believe that she was let go because of an actual moral judgment of anything that she said, but simply because she kept causing bad headlines. She kept coming up in the news cycle, and every time she did, it was Mandalorian star controversy. So it was repeated bad press, so she was gone. Now, her choice at this point has been to hook up with Ben Shapiro and work with him on a film project, which is, whatever you think of Ben Shapiro, is going to be very small potatoes compared to working with Lucasfilm and Disney. So, but she is certainly capable of working with people who don't feel that the PR around her is going to hurt their particular brand. And Ben Shapiro's brand, again, whatever you think of him, isn't really going to be hurt by most of the stuff that is circled around her. So that's where she is at. The ding for her was repeatedly causing bad press. So Amber Heard, the issues around her are not on-set behavior. So we're not looking at a Joss Whedon situation. You would think that it would be equivalent to Gina Carano, though, since these stories about Amber Heard keep coming up. They've been coming up in news cycles for about a year, fairly reliably. There is a similarity, but there's also a fairly key difference, which is that the things coming up about Amber Heard are basically new details about the same stuff. So from the perspective of a studio head or an agent, she's not repeatedly getting into trouble. She got into trouble, and the details and the reasons why and the information behind why people are turning on her, more is coming out, but the incidents aren't happening anew. So with Carano, there's fairly reliable reporting that after her first few issues on Twitter and causing controversy, she was talked to by the people running The Mandalorian and her agents, you have to stop doing this. And then she kept doing it, and so they let her go. Again, both Lucasfilm and her rep agency dropped her. Amber Heard isn't repeatedly doing the same stuff, so it is slightly different. They can't really shake a finger at her and said, we told you to behave, because she's not committing new offenses. We're finding out new information about older stuff that happened, and largely all circling the same handful of incidents with Johnny Depp. So it isn't quite the same. And again, I'm not passing moral judgment on whether they should or should not ditch Amber Heard. I'm only talking about why this is playing out a little bit different. The other thing to keep in mind is that there are some people out there who like to talk about Hollywood like it's a monolith, who will look at something like this and go, well, they fired Gina Carano. Why won't they fire Amber Heard? Well, because they're not employed by the same people. Gina Carano worked for Lucasfilm, owned by Disney. Amber Heard's major franchise is DC, owned by Warner Brothers. These are completely different companies. So you can't really be going, well, they did this to this person, let's do this. It's not the same people. It's the same industry. They all know each other, but it's not actually the same people. So even if we narrow it down within Warner Brothers, this is where Johnny Depp gets roped back in, because Johnny Depp was let go from the third Fantastic Beasts movie, which already has its own issues having to do with J.K. Rowling and the tarnishing of her name, but I'm definitely not getting back into that right now. But he was let go out of his role as Grindelwald, who was actually the titular character in the second of those films. He was ultimately replaced by Mads Mikkelsen. And again, I did talk about that in the video I mentioned earlier that I did over on the break room, where it wasn't necessarily that there was a firm determination that Johnny Depp did or didn't do what he's been accused of doing around Amber Heard. But the issue was he lost a suit where he tried to sue a British tabloid, and he lost. And the way that the libel laws work in England, for him to lose, that's a bad look, because it's a lot easier to sue people for libel and defamation in England than it is in the US. So for him to take that suit and to lose, that was kind of a bad sign. And that was probably why he was let go. Again, I suspect not because of a moral judgment of what he did. But this brings me back to, well, now we are talking within the same company, because Harry Potter is being handled under Warner Brothers. DC is being handled under Warner Brothers. Why aren't they treating these people the same? Because certainly the look for Warner Brothers right now, and it's not a good look, is that they are siding with Heard against Depp. That's not a good look. But there's a couple of things to keep in mind. The first is, even though this is the same parent company, these are different divisions. The producers and head studio people in charge of fostering the Harry Potter franchise are not the same people in charge of and fostering the DC franchise. Now, they answer to the same people, but the odds of the absolute top brass getting involved on this are incredibly rare and very, very unlikely. Generally, it's going to be the head of that immediate division who is making their call as to whether or not it is a good or bad idea to continue keeping this person in. And the person heading Harry Potter doesn't have to care that what they decide to do with Depp is consistent with what whoever is currently making the hiring and firing choices on the DC side of things decides to do with Amber Heard. They don't have to be consistent. Again, not the same people. However, falling under the same umbrella of the same parent company, it is not a great look. And actually, let's touch back on the rumors that went around. It'll be yesterday if I get this out as quickly as I intend to. So, what was odd, and this is one of the things that debunked it, but I'm just going to entertain this as a thought exercise really briefly. What was odd about that rumor was that the rumor wasn't that she was fired because of anything related to Depp. The rumor was that she was fired because she failed her physical. Now, I'm not going to say that kind of thing never happens, but one, it almost never happens to stars the size of Heard. Now, Heard is hardly the biggest name in Aquaman, but she is a name at this point. Someone with the amount of clout, professional clout that she would have, wouldn't be fired for failing a physical. And let's be clear, failing a physical in this case basically means, and like the rumors even got into detail, she wasn't in shape to do the stunts and had put on weight. So this was part of the debunking. Now, again, people can be let go for that, but that's usually your lower rung C-list supporting characters or your extras get dumped for that. Your name in the opening credits stars don't get dropped for that. And it would be as bad a look as it is right now for Warner Brothers to continue to employ her when they got rid of Depp. It would be a very bad look for them to basically fire a woman for gaining weight. That ain't a good look either. But there's one other thing that I'm not sure if people are accounting for that I think is probably in play as to what, well, I say two other things. But here's the first of two that I don't see people accounting for when they talk about why Warner Brothers is or isn't or should or shouldn't get rid of Amber Heard. The first is Warner Brothers doesn't want their own version of James Gunn on their hands. So let's go over that real quick. Quick reminder, James Gunn was all set up to do Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 for Marvel over at Disney. He was let go and cut out of that when there was an online campaign over some old tweets that he had done, where he made light of things like child abuse. Now, Disney acted very quickly and in a way fairly predictable. This is bad press. It is in direct contradiction to the kind of image we try and have as a company. You're gone. The thing was, Disney really ended up with egg on their face over that because, well, for a number of reasons. The first is, it became clear fairly soon after he was fired, it was fairly easy to track back that this wasn't really a sincere groundswell of people who did not approve of James Gunn. It was a coordinated effort by people who disliked his political opinions, who dug up old tweets of his that he had actually, not only were they years old, but he had acknowledged in the past, apologized for in the past, and at this point had years of not repeating that behavior and in fact of disavowing it. So it really ended up being bad for Disney because they basically gave into a fake outrage campaign and fired someone for stuff that they would have been well aware of, or at least should have been well aware of at the time that they hired him, and stuff that all evidence indicated he had gotten better about and grown and was no longer like that. And so they lost him, lost a lot of time. They did ultimately bring him back, and he will make Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, not before Warner Brothers snatched him up to do the Suicide Squad first. So Disney lost time and turnaround time on getting a new Guardians of the Galaxy, and they lost that time to their direct rival in terms of superhero franchises. So that was a real bad look for Disney. Disney came out really bad for that deal. And so Warner Brothers, or anybody, any studio, is going to be really wary about letting someone go for stuff done offset some time ago. Now, this is not me equating tweets that James Gunn did with the behavior that it is believed and suspected and possible that Amber Heard has engaged in. I'm not equivocating those things at all, but I'm saying that the events that happen with James Gunn are going to make the people who make the hiring and firing decisions wary of being too quick to fire in a case like Amber Heard, where even though the actions are very different, on paper, the amount of time that has gone on since it happened, the fact that it is not directly related to on-job behavior, and that it just seems to be the same things coming up around older stuff, is going to make them at least slightly wary that they're going to make the same kind of mistake Disney did. Now, that's not to say that they may not eventually make the decision to cut her loose. There does seem to be a pretty significant amount of support for that idea, but there is one other thing related to that. I'll come back to that in a minute. But at the very least, something like James Gunn happening to Disney would give them reason to go about this slowly as opposed to swiftly. Now, that last thing that I set aside, there's a difference in audience to be considered. And what I mean by that is, and I'll even try and limit this within just what's going on at Warner Brothers. Let's set Disney aside for a bit. The audience for Harry Potter is much more heavily female, is much more heavily liberal-leaning for the most part, is going to be much less tolerant to a man accused of abusing a woman. So I strongly suspect part of the calculus for ditching Depp, but being slower to and possibly not at all ditching Heard, is that the audience for Harry Potter is going to be far less likely to tolerate the presence of Depp, or at least the studio heads believe that, and they would have reason to, than the DC audience is likely to not tolerate Amber Heard. Because, well, what has DC been dealing with? Release the Snyder Cut! The response from people who are passionate about DC has been, stop interfering. Has been to the studio heads, stop stepping in. Give us what we wanted in the first place. Now, you can make an argument that the people who want the Snyder Cut don't actually care about Amber Heard, and I'd be prepared to agree with that, but that's enough reason to muddy the waters to think that for as many people as have signed online petitions to have Amber Heard fired, and let's also be really clear, nobody cares about online petitions. Nobody does. But there are a significant number of names on it. But there is really no reason to believe, as much as the petition signers would want us to believe, but there is absolutely no reason to believe that every signature on that petition is a ticket sale lost. Because there is a very good chance that an awful lot of people who are very angry at Amber Heard don't care about the DC movies. Whereas what at this point is the proven passionate audience for the DC movies, especially in the wake of the Snyder Cut stuff, they care about not having things interfered with. Now, again, that's not me saying if somebody wanted the Snyder Cut, they wouldn't want her fired. No, individuals will vary. People will have their own points of view. I'm not trying to say what other people do or don't believe, but I'm saying from a demographic perspective, from the perspective of somebody trying to run the numbers, because that, every time, is what I come back to. It is about the money. People are running numbers and calculus to try and figure out what is the damage if we ditch her, what is the damage if we keep her. Because at this point, there's damage either way. What I think is very, very likely is if Amber Heard is kept on for Aquaman 2, I do not expect her to come back again. I do not expect her to show up in Aquaman 3 if that happens. I do not expect her to show up in any more team-up movies if and when those happen. So ultimately, look, it's just a mess. Warner Brothers is not in a comfortable position right now. There is no clear good choice for them to make right now under the circumstances they are in, which, is why the rumors are able to fly as wildly and as quickly as they currently are. Because they can get rid of Amber Heard. If they're going to do that, it would be in their best interest to have a contract violation, which is where something like the supposed failing of the physical rumor came from. But if they were to fire her for that specifically, bad look. And also, as I said, there's the potential risk that they're giving in to a hate mob for something that most people wouldn't want them to give in on, which is what happened with James Gunn. And then on the other hand, they have the fact that Johnny Depp was let go from a film division within the same company. And a lot of people are throwing a lot of support behind him. And if they continue to employ her, that's not a good look. Warner Brothers has no great options here. It's a question of what does more damage, and the answer right now is not super clear as to what does more damage, which I suspect is why they are kind of sitting on it and will probably continue to sit on it. I wouldn't be shocked if what they decide to do is to basically let things move forward and see if they either calm down or get worse. If they get worse, they may in fact do what they did with Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp had started filming Fantastic Beasts 3. And they had to get rid of him, and they're going to have to reshoot his scenes. That is possible that they could do that with Amber Heard. And I wouldn't be surprised that if she ends up getting let go, it ends up happening partway into the filming because things get worse. But the other thing about waiting is maybe things quiet down, or at the very least fail to escalate any further than they have, in which case they ride her out this one film on her contract and don't renew and move on from there. Because while I don't doubt there are people who will make the decision to not see Aquaman 2 because of Amber Heard's involvement, much like the people like me who made the choice to not see The Mandalorian 2 at the time it came out because of some of the people involved in that. Disney doesn't give a crap. We aren't that many. And some people will choose not to see Aquaman 2 if she's in it. Warner Brothers doesn't give a crap. You aren't that many. I'm sorry, you're not. Boycotts don't work. They never work. But bad press is bad press. And if that picks up enough or is persistent enough, that might do it. But as of right now, we don't know. And I don't think we will know for a little while. Of course, I could be wrong about that. Things could have already changed between when I shot this and when I released it, as I said at the front end. But that's where we are right now. This stuff is a mess. And as much as I don't actually really like talking about it all that much, the part of me that can't stop myself is because I find it interesting to look at the way the machinery works and the way the computations of Hollywood deal with these things when they come up, and the ways that small differences change the outcomes. The small differences between James Gunn, Joss Whedon, Gina Carano, Amber Heard, Johnny Depp, the small differences in each case resulting in different outcomes. I do find that interesting, and it is something I think is worth talking about. I still don't really like talking about it because it means I have to dip my toes into some insanely toxic and divisive subjects in order to do it. But, that's the risk I run. That's it for this one, folks. I have a Patreon. If you enjoyed this video and what I do, or if you want to do something nice for me for my birthday, which is later this month, that's actually the present I would like the most. Failing that, I do have an Amazon and Etsy wish list down in the description, as well as my P.O. box if you want to send me something that isn't off either of those. But other than me trying to get people to buy me stuff, please. Other than that, whatever your thoughts are, as long as it isn't arguing over what did or didn't happen between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, drop them down in the comments and let's talk about it. The usual stuff aside from that. Like, share, subscribe. But you don't have to do any of it. End of the day, folks, you are the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.